I would say the one thing that the drugs did for me pre-competition that, you know, maybe this is a cope, maybe it's not. I think we used too much harsh drugs for too long. And I think it affected a lot of our recovery. Like your appetite would decrease, your sleep wouldn't be good. And I felt like maybe we left some of our best stuff in the gym because we were like so cooked from the gear that we didn't get as much out of it. Listen, I'm not going to deny that the stuff made me more aggressive, but I was already an aggressive guy. Like I already was that way.
All right. Welcome back to the next episode of the Iron Road podcast, here with my illustrious co-host, Eric Prush, BJJ extraordinaire, soon to be black belt, I think, right?
We're getting there. We're getting there, my friend.
So I'm happy to be back for the second episode. As we left on a cliffhanger, I know there's millions of people clamoring to hear this. So on the cliffhanger from last time, we discussed a little bit about the transition from powerlifting for you to BJJ. So I wanted to first ask you, how's your training going currently? And then we can dive into that question of, what was that whole transition like from two very different sports?
Sure. It's kind of funny because I just took a pretty lengthy hiatus from the mat, only about 6 months. My philosophy is always, I don't get paid to do this. And so my perspective is if I start to feel a little bit burnt out, I'll always take a little bit of time off and focus on something else. A couple of years ago, I had a gnarly staph infection, took some time off and actually trained for a 5K, got back on it. So it's always 3 to 6 months off every few years because in grappling, you don't have an off season. It's not like college wrestling or something where you have your season and your off season. And so if you're training 4, 5, 6 days a week, which is usually what I do, there is going to be burnout, when you're doing it for years on end, especially, you're a father, you're a business owner, whatever, there's going to be a lot of other stuff in your life aside from just grappling. So I took a break and just had some fun and did some bodybuilding, hired Justin Harris to do my nutrition coaching and, put on I would say like a good 15, 18 pounds of like actual tissue. I mean, I had showed you the before and afters.
Yeah.
And it was, I mean, it's pretty much just pure muscle that I had gained. Of course, I had been bigger in the past, right? When I was powerlifting, I was up to like 260. So a lot of that's muscle memory and everything else. But I took a break from jiu-jitsu and then got back to the mat, had left at about 215, got back to the mat at about 235. And it in a way reminded me of my transition back to jiu-jitsu from many, many years ago. I don't even know if you know this. I didn't start powerlifting. I started training jiu-jitsu in 2005, 2006. Trained for about 3 years, got a blue belt. I had some injuries, so it wasn't really 3 years straight. I trained way too hard. I was training twice a day, 6 days a week, and I just wasn't having fun. It wasn't something that I felt like I was getting better at. The sport was so much different back then than it is now. There was just less techniques. There were less top level instructors, and I just felt like I wasn't getting, the reward from all my time, and took time off, got into competitive powerlifting, which is when you and I met probably back in 2010, 2011, something like that. For about 5 years, I want to say, or at least trained in that style for about 5 years, and then got back into jiu-jitsu after that. And the transition from powerlifting to jiu-jitsu it's kind of hilarious actually, because the good thing about it, I've seen a lot of grapplers who struggle with aging, like they're getting older, they're getting slower. Powerlifting like blew my body out so bad that I was already slow and totally inflexible and immobile by the time I got back onto the mat at age 29. So it was like I didn't have to deal with the agony of seeing my speed go away. I was like, well, here's the deal. You're 250, you're slow, your joints hurt, you can't move. Let's start building a jiu-jitsu game around that instead of when I was younger. I was originally competing at 187 in jiu-jitsu. So it was a completely different body type. My style was much more based on conditioning and high pace, and obviously that wasn't doable anymore, So it was a very interesting experience, but what's What's funny about it, I'm sure you know who Eddie Bravo is, right?
Yeah.
Famous jiu-jitsu. He always tells these stories, and I think it's so true of strength and conditioning coaches, where if you have an MMA fighter, and back in the day, it was less common to have an MMA coach and more common to have a boxing, a Muay Thai, a wrestling, a jiu-jitsu coach. And every coach would be like competing to see like what I taught him helped him win the fight or
Yeah.
something.
More effective.
Exactly. Like,
Yeah.
you're a striker now. You're not a grappler or whatever. And I think strength coaches do that too. I think sometimes we overvalue strength for competitive sports, and we kind of forget that the most important thing for success in a sport is actually being good at the sport. Like, it
Yeah.
doesn't matter how much
Yeah.
you deadlift or how much you bench or how high you can jump if you suck at the sport itself. Like, yeah, these are all
Yeah.
great things, right? These are all like things that contribute to a base of athleticism that will help us succeed. But if you're not good at the sport, it really doesn't matter, you know? And so when I got back into jiu-jitsu, I had gone from being one of the better deadlifters in my weight class for that period of time. Those numbers now are long since been
Long
blown
gone.
past. They're not even
Long
like
gone.
impressive anymore. But back then,
Yeah.
I was top 20, maybe even top 15 in my weight class. So I never felt like I was getting out muscled on the mat. To
Okay.
this day, I still don't feel like that's why I lose or something, right?
That's
But
nice.
obviously, yeah, it's great. But we'll get to the kind of double side of that in a second, but for me, it was always, I just don't know how to do this. Like, my technique isn't good. Guys that know how to fight are kicking my ass because I don't know how to fight, right? And that's a totally different skill set, and it takes a really, really long time. But I struggled because my identity, and this is still a problem I have, my identity was so tied up in I am a jacked, strong guy that I would spend probably too much time lifting and not enough time either addressing technique, although I kind of got to that pretty quickly, or addressing cardiovascular conditioning, which was a real problem for me going from, I competed in jiu-jitsu in 2009 at about 207 pounds, competed in powerlifting at 242. Some meets I had to cut to make it. Others I was a little bit slimmer, but regardless, still a minimum 35-pound weight gain, right? And I just did not have the stamina. And it really held me back because I couldn't let go of the image I had of myself of Eric Prush, the strong guy.
Okay. That's fair.
And it definitely held me back for a little bit. And it still does. It's still in the back of my head. But I do think, be curious to hear your opinion on this. It's interesting because I was so much stronger than most of the guys in the grappling gyms that I was at, and I was still getting my ass kicked, it almost made me undervalue strength. Because I've never been the guy that was getting out muscled on the mat. I'm sure it could happen if I was going against a real specimen or someone who was competing at super heavyweight or something.
Sure.
But even when I go with 300-pound guys, I don't feel like I'm really getting out muscled. Like, yes, their weight is a problem. You know what I mean? Them leaning on you, that sucks. And there's nothing you can do about it. But I don't feel like I don't have the strength to hold them off and defend myself in that regard. But you still get your ass kicked.
Yeah.
By smaller guys who are more technical. And sometimes I forget that there are grapplers who are the total opposite. They're technical savants, but they are so weak that not only does it affect their style, they can't even keep their bodies healthy.
Yeah. The structural integrity is not there.
Mm-hmm.
So they don't have that musculoskeletal strength just to hold the joints together if they get twisted a certain way, or they don't have the resiliency that somebody who's barbell trained might have.
Oh, for sure. And like, I rarely had injuries that would come from being weak. Most of my injuries were like just general kind of wear and tear. I had a groin tear that was just because I was actually not mobile enough. And that's kind of the side effect of squatting and deadlifting super heavy and being a heavier person. But it was an interesting perspective because a lot of the other grapplers that I have trained with or that I've coached, they're really weak. And then when I start training them, they're like, oh my God, I can't believe how much better I feel on the mat. Where for me, it was almost like if I wanted to get good at jiu-jitsu, I probably should have lifted like 1 to 2 days a week and done jiu-jitsu, the other, like everything else. Because even if I maintained a 600-pound deadlift, that's still very, very good for a combat athlete.
Yeah.
Very, very good for a combat athlete.
Do you think that some of the rigidity and the strength. At least, like you said, like there are some guys who are technical savants, but their strength is not on par. Having a certain level of strength, it's not a bad thing. To be able to get yourself out of a hairy situation in grappling, having that much strength to be able to muscle out if you have to, if you can in certain circumstances, it's got to be useful. I would expect that it's more common to have really strong guys dominate in wrestling versus jiu-jitsu, because you can kind of give me the history of jiu-jitsu, but it was kind of built for a smaller guy versus a larger guy. So you don't have to be strong with the techniques that are being used. You can use leverage and use skill, like you said, and be a little more cunning and not have to overpower everyone. Where wrestling, as much as it's technique, you have to be really strong and you have to be, highly conditioned to keep that pace. Where grappling, again, I did mostly striking with my martial arts experience, so I don't have that much grappling experience. But when you said conditioning, are you in training, especially, are you relaxed much of the time when you're just going for a long period of time? Because wrestling is short bouts of very intense activity, whereas grappling, are you kind of like just feeling the guy out most of the time in practice, and it's just an ongoing, like a low intensity cardio, would you say? Or is it more
It's a great
about...
question. I think one of the things that fascinates me about everything, athletics, politics, whatever, is systems. How the rules or the reasons why things were established drift downstream and fundamentally change the people who engage in this activity, right? So jiu-jitsu, you could definitely beat up someone who is bigger than you and stronger than you, assuming that he is a much lower skilled level than you.
Fair
right?
point.
As jiu-jitsu has progressed, you are seeing more and more guys rely on athleticism. However, jiu-jitsu, there's a lot of ways to win in jiu-jitsu. And this is, I think, I was listening to someone speak about this the other day, and it really hit the nail on the head for me. Think about MMA. In mixed martial arts, if you wind up on your back and you have a really, really good guard, the guy on top says, hey, stand up. And you have to stand up. In jiu-jitsu, you have to pass the guard. If you don't, that's considered stalling. Okay. And you could lose a match just based on that alone.
Really?
So jiu-jitsu allows, we'll say, less athletic people to be successful because the nature of the rule set. If you have to pass my guard and now I can tie your body up, I can connect my body to your body in such a way that your foot speed is perhaps no longer really a weapon for me, that's going to help guys who are maybe slower but perhaps more technical. That's and also there's almost no such thing really as an upset in jiu-jitsu, because to submit someone, especially on a high level, you have to be usually a lot better than that person. There's no flash knockouts in jiu-jitsu. There's no it could maybe happen like guillotines or ankle locks early in a match when someone is not sweaty yet and the opponent in question is just super jacked up on adrenaline and they have a really good squeeze. But in general, to pass someone's guard, control them and submit them, there has to be, I think, a pretty big skill difference there.
Like technical dominance.
Yes. Or someone has to be taking risks or making mistakes, right? And in fact, the best grappler today, maybe even the best grappler of all time, and someone who I've stolen almost every single move I do from, is a guy by the name of Gordon Ryan. He's my height, about 6'1", 6'2", my weight, he's competed at 99 kilos, and then he's competed in the heavier 99 plus kilos, but never really weighed more than 230. And he is slow, very stiff, like not mobile, but he has great isometric strength and has absolutely incredible technique and efficiency of movement, and is able to just destroy guys. I mean, shut down guys. Like, he grappled Husamar Palhares, and he didn't finish him, but he had his back for literally 15 minutes. Okay. A guy who is an absolute genetic freak, an explosive, strong, jacked person, right? So jiu-jitsu does allow for that by the nature of the rules. And then on top of that, there are different rules within the rules. So Gordon Ryan is famous for preferring submission only, no time limit matches. So we're going to go until someone taps. So and some of these matches he's had are 90 minutes. Okay.
That's crazy.
So that means there's no points, right? So you could make a mistake. You could actually maybe let an opponent pass your guard and then use that to get on top of them because there's no points. If you're competing in the IBJJF where you have 7 to 10 minute matches, there are a lot of guys in that rule set that win and they never submit anybody. They just play the point system.
Outpoint. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
So you'll even see different types of athletes dominating different rule sets, which makes it very interesting. A lot of the more explosive athletic guys do very, very well in the IBJJF system. And a lot of the guys who are slower and more technical, they're very good, obviously, in submission only. And they do very, very well in the ADCC Abu Dhabi Combat Club rule set, where the first half of the match, there are no points. The second half of the match, there are points, but it's much more difficult to score. Like in IBJJF, if I pass your guard and you go to that turtle position, it still counts as a guard pass, to the best of my knowledge. In ADCC, it doesn't. There's all sorts of things that, yeah, you might pass, but you didn't score. And now the guy on top is using more energy, and maybe I let him do that for 7 minutes. Now I'm fresh and he's not, and that's when I attack.
Understood.
So you see different rule sets will select for different styles of grappler. So for me, my body type, and also the guys that I train with predominantly trained for submission only or ADCC. So
Okay.
my style is very much based on being slow, methodical, taking a long time to get to the positions that I want to get to, because that's essentially how I was taught when I came back from my hiatus from jiu-jitsu originally while I was powerlifting. So different rule sets will obviously select for different types of athlete. There's
Sure.
no
Yeah.
question. Same thing if you look at like rugby, soccer, and American football all essentially share a common ancestor, but a very different type of athlete's going to be successful in soccer versus American football, right?
Absolutely.
Just the physical demands are totally different. So this is not that different, but it is quite a bit different. And on the topic of wrestling is notorious, and maybe not notorious, but it's well known. I don't want to give it a negative connotation. Wrestling has very aggressive anti-stalling penalties. So it just calls for action. I think if you take more than 3 steps back in a match, you get a warning. Another 3 steps back, they start taking points, which is why it's such an aggressive sport.
Yeah,
so it obviously rewards more physical intensity. It rewards more explosiveness. But interestingly enough, as time has gone on, you're seeing more and more technical magicians dominating wrestling and less physical freaks. The freaks are still there. They'll always be there, right? But Americans have started to learn how to be more technical. They've kind of, I think, inherited a lot of stuff from the Russian system. The athletes had more longevity. They were maybe perhaps a little bit more technical, whereas Americans, it was always just like go, 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 go. And so back in the day, you get a guy like Dan Gable, who after one Olympic cycle, he's done. Mentally, physically, he's done.
It's so intense. You can't.
It's so intense.
You can't
it's completely insane.
Physically, mentally.
Yeah. Whereas the Russians, famously, they might have wrestled hard 2 days a week. Everything else was drilling, heavy emphasis on strength and conditioning. And now the dominant wrestling team in America in terms of the collegiate scene is Penn State University, coached by a guy named Cale Sanderson, who is probably the greatest American wrestler of all time. And famously, they train hard maybe 2 days a week.
So we mentioned something a little bit last time about the Eastern European lifting style, how they really base their training on longevity versus, short, intense bursts and what you can get out of the next 12-week cycle. It's interesting to see how that crosses over sports in that culture, and now how people are starting to wise up. And if you're going to stick around to be good enough, long enough, you have to pace yourself. You have to train differently.
It's ultimately, you need time under the bar or on the mat in order to improve.
Yeah.
The guy who gets the most productive hours, if you're a guy that shows up and you see this a lot, guys that do jiu-jitsu because they want to be in shape. Those guys are usually not very good at jiu-jitsu because they approach it as a workout. So they go crazy. They try to get their heart rate up. Okay. The guys who show up and say, well, I actually want to learn jiu-jitsu. Well, of course, as a side effect, you'll get in better shape. It's obviously exercise. It is a form of wrestling. But if you start to view it as a technical thing and you start to think about what works for me and you spend the time to work on those things instead of thinking, I just have to stay in motion the whole time, that guy on a longer timeline is always going to win, not just because he's more mindful about his training, but because he can train more consistently. It's exhausting to do 6 rounds of sparring with your heart rate jacked up above 170 beats per minute for a half hour. That's a very, very
Yeah.
hard workout. Okay.
Yes.
But, if I were to look at my data, I'll get to 170. You'll see it spike every now and again in big exchanges, but I'm only going that hard when I'm either really have to defend myself or there's a scramble and I want to get on top of the guy or I'm trying to close out a submission. And I've always felt that that allowed me to train instead of 3 days a week, which originally when I was younger and lighter, I wanted to be like Sean Shark. I wanted to just be like this guy
I
that just
love that
kept
style.
going and going and going. And it wasn't, I'm not that kind of athlete. That's just not who I am. Back then, 3 days a week took a lot out of my body. I just turned 39 last week and I could pretty consistently train, 4 to 6 days a week, doing 6 rounds a day. And for the most part, I feel okay. You'll have some shitty days, obviously. Obviously, your sleep has to be good, your nutrition has to be dialed in, hydration. That's important for every sport, no question. But as you become more technical, the sport does become less physically demanding. And I think that that's something the Russians had tapped into with their wrestling, for some time. They were also keenly aware of the different demands of weight classes. This is not something that Americans have figured out yet, by the way. So,
Still,
like,
even still.
no, of course not. Like, dude, think about like heavyweight boxing. How many great heavyweights and MMA as well? How many great boxers or fighters, and you see this in grappling too, compete on a high level into their 40s? It happens a lot. It happens a lot. Reason being, these guys are, first of all, not that fast relative to the lighter weight classes. So their game is less built on speed. Speed is always the first attribute to go when
Yeah.
you're as an athlete. No question about
With
it. Okay.
age. With age.
100%. 100%.
As you age, yeah. They said
And,
a lot
and
about soccer players. After like 25, your speed tanks.
absolutely.
So
Absolutely.
if you're a
And
flyweight,
so
it's not going to bode well for you long term.
the point is now a heavyweight, realistically, if you were to look at, I do this with my clients, I train a lot of lighter jiu-jitsu guys. When I look at their training data when they're on the mat, it is so much less demanding on them metabolically than it is on me, right? And so what a lot of the Russians and a lot of people are doing now is like, okay, I've got a guy that's 250. I'm going to cap him at, I'm making up a number here, 6 rounds a day. Whereas my lighter guys, I might let them have 9 rounds a day, right? Because it's just so much extra wear and tear on their joints, which means at 30, the lighter guy might have a lot more mat experience, but he has a lot more wear and tear. Okay. Now that's when you start pushing it to later. Later in life, speed is less important. Now you're becoming a technical wizard because you put so much time in and you haven't blown your body out. Think of the one heavyweight that we both know that didn't do this, and he had a really high peak, but it was very short, was Cain Velasquez. He was notorious for doing conditioning like a total madman. You very rarely saw him get gassed in a fight. And what happened? Knees, his body fell apart on him by the time he was in his early 30s. Where you see other guys, like John Jones has always had a very methodical fighting style. So always walked around over 215, 220, and has been a force for his whole career precisely because he understood how to pace himself both in training and in a fight. And he built a style based around technique and angles and leverage instead of just, I'm going to bull through you. That only works for so long.
He was also, like a Michael Phelps for swimming. John Jones is built for the sport with his reach, with his angles. He's got
Absolutely.
such a fight IQ that it's undeniable. So your levers don't do everything. Stefan Struve gets knocked out every other fight because he just doesn't have the technical ability that John Jones does. But I just feel like some people, they're built for it and they find the passion and the drive to excel at a high level like a John Jones. So it's pretty cool to see when somebody like a Jordan, a Tyson, they have all the tools physically needed, plus mentally for a certain amount of time. Because I've always heard about John Jones is that, I want to get your opinion on this, he will take large training hiatuses between fights. So is that good? Or, I mean, he's so technical at this point. He's kind of in his own league to a certain degree, but would you say that to spare yourself the wear and tear, that training so hard all the time is a better idea? Or, I mean, taking a hiatus would be a better idea? Or most guys need to get better so badly that they have to stay in the game and train for so long and
Depends on
continuously.
how talented you are, right? If you
Well,
have
yeah,
if you have
fair.
the luxury of such a skill gap where you can take time away, it could be a positive, assuming that you don't let yourself get so out of shape that you're a disaster. Okay. Like,
Okay.
if you're still lifting, doing some cardio, keeping your body composition under control, it could be a net positive because that's perhaps part of the reason why he could fight until he's 39, 40 years old and still
Yeah.
dominate. He's not just fighting, he's dominating,
Yeah,
you know?
he
But
is.
it's interesting. You referenced Mike Tyson. I think about this a lot. Like when I was younger, I felt like when it came to Mike Tyson, everybody was like, "Oh my God, imagine how good he could have been if uh, he didn't go. Don King didn't get his hooks in him, or if Customato didn't die." And I think there's no question that Tyson left something on the table. But ultimately, uh, his fighting style was never going to age well. Here's a guy who's 5'10, 215, 220, entirely reliant upon speed and movement to get inside on much bigger fighters. At some point, he was going to hit a wall with his physical abilities that someone like a Lennox Lewis, who's 6'5", has tremendous power in a straight right hand. Like, yeah, I'm sure Tyson probably had a very good chance of beating him when they were younger, but later in life, I mean, Lennox Lewis worked him. Now, granted, Mike had been a mess at that point, and it wasn't peak
Yeah.
Mike, but there are absolutely limitations to every style. Like you think of Conor McGregor. How many times have you seen Conor McGregor gas in a fight, and then he's like, "I'm not gassing again. I'm going to get it together." I no doubt in my mind that Conor McGregor was at the time putting the work into not gas. But every attribute has a cost, right?
Yeah.
If you are a type 2 fast twitch muscle freak, your endurance will not be world class. Okay. You could do things to mask it. Like, here's a great story. We both know probably one of my greatest heroes in life, Bas Rutten. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Bas Rutten tells this story. He went to go fight in Pancrase in Japan. Okay. So it was bare knuckle. He says he has no idea what he signed up for. He said he gets there and he's like, all right, how many rounds? And the guy's like, oh, don't worry, boss, only one round. He's like, great, one round, awesome. How long's the round? 30 minutes. And he was like, great, great. In his head, he's like, oh, shit. Oh, what the fuck did I just sign up for? But he was very intelligent. He understood that he was an explosive fighter. He had enough experience to know that he had a tendency to gas out. So if you watch his fights, he put the letter R on the back of each of his hands, okay, to remind him to relax.
Really?
Okay. And
It
he
was open
eventually,
palm striking, wasn't
yeah,
it?
it was palm striking. Exactly.
So
You
you said
couldn't, you
bare
couldn't
knuckle, but
do,
open palm
you
only.
couldn't close fist to the face. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
And he wore like leather boots at that point.
Yes, they all did. It was like
For
the
his
weird
leather
uniform. Yeah.
kicks.
So bizarre. Yeah. And what made it interesting was he released a DVD of him calling his own fights, and I've watched it so many times. And he revealed this little gem that he actually had his cornermen teach him to attack in intervals. So he would go really hard and try to knock you out for 30 seconds, and then foot off the gas for 90 seconds to 2 minutes. Okay. And of course, if the guy's hurt, he's going to keep the pressure on.
Well, yeah, he smelled
Yeah.
blood.
Yeah.
But so he made his own rounds, basically.
Yep. Within the fight, he made his own rounds because he realized I'm an explosive fighter. I can't do the Nick Diaz and throw 500 strikes in a round and be fine. Like if I do this,
wear you down.
I'm going to be exhausted. And dude, a 30-minute round, you gas, just go home. It's over. There's nothing you can do. It's got to be the worst feeling in the world.
Yes.
And so he was able to realize I'm a fast twitch guy. So I have to give these fibers, I'm sure he wasn't thinking this way, but I have to give these fibers time to recover from explosive bouts. The bigger, more explosive fibers have less capillaries in them. There's less blood flow, meaning that they take more time to recover between sets. I mean, how many guys do we know that were explosive lifters that they're resting 15 minutes between sets of squats?
Well, yeah.
And yeah, granted, some of them are out of shape, but if you're shooting up 800 plus pounds off your back, and it looks easy, right, to the outside viewer, but that's so hard on your body, right? Just so hard.
But how much of that recovery do you think is more nervous system than, blood flow and like a martial arts recovery between rounds?
It's both. So this is something that I learned from coming back into jiu-jitsu. I spent so much time, not just training for strength, but you were there, training people for strength. That
Sure.
was the world that we lived in. It was just
Yeah.
get strong, get strong. Yes, get big, but get big just to get strong. Like strength
I
was
miss
the
it.
ultimate goal. Yeah, it was awesome. It was a great time.
So
But
much
you
fun.
start to realize that if your aerobic system is underdeveloped, not only does it cause issues with recovery between sets, but it also causes issues with recovery between workouts, right? So, like, if you are jacked up on adrenaline, right, this is synonymous with your heart rate being through the roof. Okay. So you dump a bunch of adrenaline, and what happens? Like, you go into that stressed out fight or flight mode. And then what happens? It takes a while to get it to come back down. And that's even if you're conditioned. Now imagine you're deconditioned, right? Your resting heart rate's like 80. Okay. You're 300 pounds. Okay. There is a nervous system effect. Like, yeah, you just dumped a bunch of adrenaline. And in order to calm yourself down, you need to have a well-conditioned aerobic system that does that for you. But as we know, there's, if you're going to be extremely good at something, you're going to be extremely bad at something else.
True.
Yeah. There's
Yeah.
no world record powerlifters running a marathon in a decent, respectable time. Not
That's
one.
fair.
Okay. Not
I mean,
one.
as time goes on, though, you see these guys who are becoming real freaks, and who are kind of like, not I would say hybrids, but they seem much more fit than they used to be. They have much
Yes.
more muscle for their frame than they used to have. The traditional power lifter was a big fat guy. That was like
Yes.
the old school look. But what do you think about, some people like a Lillibridge, like those, the Lillibridge brothers? Their style was very get psyched up. I mean, to the point of headbutting the bar and making yourself bleed. And then some people like a Milanachev who just walk under the bar and squat it. Like, they're still psyched up, but some people go to that war mode, that violence and war mentality, whereas other lifters don't have to go there, or they don't, it's not part of their ritual to go there. What do you think of,
A
I
great
guess,
question.
if you don't have to go to war mode for every 80% or above lift, can you perform better? Can you perform more frequently? Will you be, have more longevity in the sport of powerlifting?
So there was a period of time where obviously I was obsessed with Westside Barbell, as are all powerlifters at some point in time.
And we were in the
So
multi.
I was. You.
Me.
So are you. Or yeah, both of our faces are
Give me some
spotting
credit.
some of the most dangerous lifts ever done in
Yeah,
multiply
man.
powerlifting. Me and you were just in there like ready to die. Like no concept of self preservation. Just like squat. It's just the best. Oh my god.
Yeah,
We'll
tell
tell
some of
some of
the.
this.
You
Yeah,
have to
we
tell
have
some of
to.
those West Side
Yeah.
Barbell stories at some point.
But so I bought the Westside Barbell Book of Methods, and I actually think the greatest lesson that I learned from it was probably something that Louis Simmons thought was so common sense that he dedicated almost no time to it, aside from one sentence. He was talking about you have to know your lifter, and some guys, like, they have to get psyched up. It's in their nature. It's who they are. Even if you could give them 1,000 empirical scientific studies to show them that it's wrong, they physically cannot perform any other way. So like your Chuck Vogelpools or your Lillibridges or something like that. And as the coach, you have to take that into account. Like, okay, Milanachev might be able to get 5 repetitions, 5 singles at or above 90% of his 1 rep max in a workout because he stays so calm. Chuck Vogelpool might get 2, right? And let's be real, identity matters. Like, you can't really change who you are. I know I think people can change to an extent, but I think once you discover who you are, you have to build around that. You can't spend your whole life, like trying to force yourself to do things that you'll never do, or excel in interests that you'll never actually be good at. Right. And so what are you going to tell Chuck Vogelpool or Eric Lillibridge when they're successful? They're at the top of the sport and they physically can't do it any other way. And maybe if you tried to have them do it another way, they might just quit. They might fucking hate doing it.
Sure.
I've seen a lot of grapplers who are overactive on the mat, so much movement. They're totally crazy and it exhausts them. And no matter how many times you tell them, hey, be a little more methodical, they just won't do it.
It's their
And
style.
maybe if you made them do it, they just wouldn't do the sport anymore because
Yeah.
it's not fundamentally who they are. You know what I
Maybe
mean?
being that way is what made them drawn to the sport to begin with.
Yes, exactly. Obviously, all athletics, I think, kind of boil down to, you live by the sword, you die by the sword. What makes you great in a lot of respects will ultimately destroy you. I mean, you guys used to call me, I don't know if you remember this. You guys used to call me Discount Pete Rubish. Okay, back in the day,
The
because
poor man's Pete Rube.
yeah, just the Walmart Pete Rubish. Pete Rubish was one of the best deadlifters maybe ever at the 242 weight class. He was built a lot like me. All of his squats were kind of good mornings because of his levers. He was a mediocre bencher, but he was a freakazoid deadlifter. Just a freak. Okay. Like, if you go look up his old lifts, like his gym lifts are like more impressive than the competition lifts. Like 800 for 5 beltless. Like he would
Yeah.
just do shit in the gym that some of the most impressive feats of strength ever, considering his weight, especially. And like Pete is the kind of guy that he deadlifted, I think, like 925 or 950 in the gym at 242, which is insane. Okay.
Yeah. Outrageous.
But what happened? He got hurt a lot because he trained like a
Yeah.
fucking maniac. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? He trained like
Yeah.
a maniac. But by the same token, would he have really trained hard and pushed himself if it wasn't like, okay, my challenge for today is I'm going to deadlift 800 for 5? Some guys can come in and say, I'm taking a heavy set of 5 today. We'll see how it goes. And they'll be productive and they'll have great careers. Other guys are like, I want this number and I want it now and I'm going to go get it. And they both work, you know. I was much more, again, I was, discount Pete Rubish, much more along the lines of Pete. I didn't like to come into the gym and be like, oh, we're taking a heavy set of 5. Like, I had the program a month in advance and I'm getting 600 for 5. We're doing deficit deadlifts on a 100-pound plate. I'm getting at least 600 for 5. Like, that was like how I walked in. I couldn't do it any other way. Did it cause me to leave some of my better pulls in the gym? Absolutely. Absolutely. But would I have competed or had fun training any other way? No, I
Yeah.
wouldn't have.
It's just not your personality.
No.
You kind of, somebody like you has to leave it all out there. Training, platform, everything you have went into it at that point because that's the way you were wired. I think you had a better battle switch than I had. I didn't need to get psyched up. The smelling salts never really got me, dude. It was either I was strong enough or I wasn't. Like for me and my style, like I could get a certain amount of psyched up, and I definitely got more psyched up for powerlifting for the 1 rep max stuff than I did for strongman, which
You have
was
to.
sometimes
It's
moving
totally
events
different,
and a
dude.
longer
Yeah.
day and
Yeah.
different types of disciplines. But for me, it was always either I'm strong enough to do this or I'm not. I can, I'm gonna get amped for sure. But I think you had that switch that I don't know if I had that. Like you had the Rubish switch, right? The battle switch that you can just go in and black out and either I'm dying or this is coming off the ground, or you're going to take me out in a stretcher.
It's funny you say that. I have 2 things I want to say on that. When I got into powerlifting, I didn't understand why people behave that way. I tell people about how I used to behave when I was competing, and a lot of times they look at me like I'm an idiot. But when I explain to them why I behave that way, I think they kind of understand it more. My philosophy, powerlifting, you just pointed out, strongman's a longer day. And you have medleys, so you could make up time on the back end of a medley. There's all sorts of ways to win in strong. Well, not all sorts of ways. You still have to be strong. It's not like jiu-jitsu. But powerlifting, the way I always thought of it was, I want to hit my 3rd attempts. I want to get those PRs. Now, usually, if I had a good day, my 2nd attempt would be about a 5-pound PR.
Yeah.
Okay. Assuming training went well. Okay.
Sure.
And then the 3rd attempt would be a big PR. Well, my philosophy was like, I'm putting these drugs in my body. At that time, I had no social life. I dedicated my life to the sport for about a 5-year period. And so I thought to myself, all right, let's say I train 12 weeks for a meet. I train 12 weeks for about 9 seconds. 3 seconds on a squat, 3 seconds on a bench, 3 seconds on a deadlift. Okay. And I am not going to waste that time. Now, it's not a waste of time. You're still learning. You're still building a bigger base of strength. But my philosophy was I train 12 weeks for 3 seconds, right? And so I approached it by putting a lot of pressure on myself and getting really crazy. And it was never a put on. And when you go back and watch Pete Rubish, why he would get so crazy after his lifts, I always had this thing where it was like, I had such an insane fear of failure in that I wasn't afraid to fail, but I hated the idea of not succeeding, especially on the deadlift, because that was the only lift where I was one of the big boys in the gym.
With your bread and butter. Yeah.
Yeah. And so like I would just get myself so worked up. Like I would just basically think of all of the worst moments in my life as I was like chalking my hands to go up to the bar. And then you're holding your breath and you're straining. And then when I would put the bar down, it was like all the stuff that I was holding in would just like explode. And I would just act like a complete psycho for like 5 to 30 seconds after the lift. And when people make fun of like Dave Hoff for doing that, like I was, first of all, deadlift is the lift you're the least likely to die while you're doing it.
Fair
You just
enough.
drop the
Yeah.
weight, right? But if you're squatting over 1,000 pounds, you're benching over 900, there's like legitimate fear of death involved. And you have to push that down and go out there and do it. And you can only hold it down for so long before it gets loose. And that's why you see some of the more amped up, psyched lifters, there's just a crazy release of energy when it's over. Like, I'm almost embarrassed to admit this, but I remember the first time I squatted 600 in the gym. I have the video somewhere. I literally turned around and punched my back spotter. I was out of my mind, but I was like, I just wanted it so bad. And it was like, you're at the bottom and you're straining. And I would always get forward on my squat. So you feel your fucking back. It's just like, it's just such a visceral feeling. And then once the weight comes off your back and like the blood gets back to your head, you're like, ah, and it doesn't even make sense. Like I was never a put on. I never tried to do it. Okay. But it was just what happened. But you touched on something that I think is really interesting. It took me a long time to unlearn that for jiu-jitsu.
Yeah.
Right. So like
not a 1 rep max effort.
Even
right? Never.
The shortest round
Never.
you're going to do in a competition is generally 5 minutes, right? It's a lot longer than 3 seconds. And sometimes you're doing 20-minute rounds. I myself had a no time limit match that went over a half hour. Okay.
And I'm sure those 5-minute rounds feel like a half an hour or an hour.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. Especially if you're getting crushed, if someone's really beating the shit out of you. So like I had to really unlearn that to improve at jiu-jitsu, to be patient and not waste all my energy, and also not to get too up or down, because like you could say do a round where just by happenstance or the way that it works out, you wind up matching the strongest part of your game with the weakest part of my game, right? And you wind up kicking my ass for 5 minutes. But like maybe the next round, it's the other way around, right?
Yeah.
And I wind up kicking your ass for
the strategy changes a little bit.
For 5 minutes.
The game
you also have a lot of training you have to do. And so if you get too up or down from one round, it could really affect your ability to perform, to recover, and everything else. And honestly, a criticism of myself, I would say, was I was never, I got too down on myself for bad workouts in powerlifting. I don't think that I understood that there's only so much of this you can control. I mean, dude, how many times, I'll ask you this, in your training career, did you sleep 8 to 10 hours, drink a gallon of water, whatever it would be, but you come in prepared, is my point. You do everything possible to come in prepared for your workout, and you shit the bed. It's almost like it's out of your control sometimes. Like it's just a draw of the cards. Like
that's right.
The best workout I ever had, I still remember this. I started off, I was doing pause squats. This is when Travis Mash was doing my programming. I'll never forget this. And I felt so horrible. I got to like 3 plates on the bar that I took all the weight off. I re-warmed up again and then hit lifetime PRs on every lift I did that day.
Really?
Like a 755 block pull, like just crazy numbers that were like, that I would have never thought. I came in, I was beat up. I felt like shit. Whereas there were so many other times, I'm testing my deadlift on Monday. I'm going to get 8 hours of sleep every night this weekend. And then you hit maybe 85% of your all-time lift, right? And it's like, what's happening here? Like, there's only so much you have control of. There's only so much you understand about what's going on in your body. You got to let those things go.
It's true. And I was thinking about what we said before is that I didn't have the go switch. And I'm going to ask you a direct question. Hope you don't mind, but the substances, the steroids in various forms that have different side effects on you, on your mood, your aggression, right? Testosterone in synthetic form is going to make you a very aggressive person. I never ever tried steroids, so I didn't have, like Dave Hoff, they're doing check drops and they're doing, all kinds of additional substances to make them not only the strongest they can be, but the most aggressive they can be. So do you attribute some of that to having a much higher level of testosterone in your body?
No, I
Having
don't. Because
You
I've
don't.
seen guys do steroids, the same drugs that I did, and they didn't respond that way at all. Um,
Fair
I
enough.
think that the steroids were responsible for some of the poor decisions I made outside of the gym. You know what I mean? Like I'm already an intense person. So like it never felt like I was behaving in a way that I would not have otherwise behaved. Okay. It might have been ratcheted up a little bit. But I felt like the steroids, especially the way we were using them, I don't think if I were to redo it, I would not use gear the way I used it. Then I would do it very differently. But like, I think what was really going on was a lot of the stuff that we were using to get ready for competitions. We were not sleeping well because of the drugs. And I think it was causing a lot of dysfunction, frankly, in every other area of my life outside of the gym. I would say the one thing that the drugs did for me pre-competition that, you know, maybe this is a cope, maybe it's not. I think we used too much harsh drugs for too long. And I think it affected a lot of our recovery. Like your appetite would decrease, your sleep wouldn't be good. And I felt like maybe we left some of our best stuff in the gym because we were like so cooked from the gear that we didn't get as much out of it. Listen, I'm not going to deny that the stuff made me more aggressive, but I was already an aggressive guy. Like I already was that way. And like, frankly, I only used harsh stuff typically 4 to 6 weeks before a competition.
Okay.
Generally, I always took
Get that last
testosterone.
mile, get that
Yeah,
extra.
yeah.
Yeah.
And look, dude, like most of the time, I mean, like you don't necessarily have a frame of reference for this, but like I don't think that you necessarily knew the difference in my behavior from when I was taking a TRT dose of testosterone versus when I was taking more. I was still an aggressive loudmouth. I still love to talk shit. I still slammed the bar on the fucking floor. I
Sure.
still told everyone they sucked when they said that was just who I was.
I missed
You
that
know,
too. I missed
yeah.
that too.
But like I listen, it's very tough to say. Like I think it definitely contributed to the insanity. There's no doubt about it. But I've also never been in an environment like that where people weren't taking steroids. So I don't have a frame of reference. Like, because you got to keep in mind, okay, yes, steroids are in the mix, no question. But you also have a room full of, I mean, if I'm thinking off the top of my head, that late night crew of guys,
7
it
p.m.
was
crew.
your minimum 5 guys, and usually 8 to 10, maybe even 12 people. Okay. Only one guy in the room was older than 35,
True.
right?
I doubt.
So yeah, so you
Yeah.
have a bunch of guys that are under 27 years old who are really competitive. If you're that into lifting, you know, it's probably because you're pissed off at something. You know what I mean? At that point, like, and I think that that's the thing too. Like powerlifting and strongman. I've never really spoken to you about this. Like I'm not a bad looking person. I'm actually a pretty social person, but I didn't view myself that way when I was younger. I definitely felt very insecure about being a skinny person. And I always thought bodybuilding was just frankly gay. Like, oh, we're just trying to like look good. Like I didn't want to, I wanted to scare people. Like I didn't, like I didn't want to be like the guy that everyone looked at and was like, oh, I want to look that way. I wanted to be the person that they were like, I'm scared of that person.
Yeah.
Right. And that was kind of how I approached the sport. So like that was the energy I took into the gym with me, right? And I think that powerlifting attracts those, at least it did back then. It
Yeah.
attracted those kinds of people, like people that in their own way, they were trying to get even with someone somewhere. Okay, you know what I mean? Like
With that
it could
bar
be,
with that
yeah,
person. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
it could be their dad. It could be God. I mean, being serious here, but like there, like I was not in a good place back then mentally. We'll go into that some other time, but a really tumultuous state with my family, personal relationships and whatnot. And so for me, it was like, I'm getting even. Like I don't want a woman looking at me being like, wow, that guy's scary. I want a woman looking at me being like, if this was the year 1000 AD and I saw that guy and 20 people who looked like him come to my village, I would run. That's what I wanted. Okay, that's I like they're gonna. This is like they are going to kill everyone and just ransack the village. Like that was the fucking vibe. That's what I felt like
Yeah.
when I was
Yeah.
training. So like, and when you bring that energy into the room, and you have 10 guys who feel the same way. Okay, nobody wants to lose. Okay, and dude, I mean, for the audience, like we had like the weak guy rack and the strong guy rack.
Yeah.
And
Weak
like
guy rack.
forget
Yeah.
well. Here's the thing, though. I'm going to admit this now. Years have gone by. You should have taken my spot on the bench. You've always
All
been a
right.
better presser than me.
Well, better presser. Yeah.
Yeah, no doubt
Fair enough.
about it. Okay.
That's my one claim
Squat
to
and
fame.
deadlift, not so much, but press, 100%. Every variation of a press, you've had my number from the first day that I met you.
Yeah.
But like, nobody wanted to be like, so we had like the weak guy monolift, the strong guy monolift, and then the real cast offs who had to squat in the squat rack.
Yeah.
It was like, you're not even a human. Like you're like just like you're not like we're not gonna
Subhuman.
don't ask me for a spot. I don't want to know you. Like this is like until you can get in one of the monoliths, like you're basically like a cretin. Like we hate you. So like that was the vibe. And so
Yeah.
do I think if you took a bunch of calm, non-competitive guys and gave them trend, it would make them a little crazier for sure. But I still think that we would have been crazier, even off drugs, than the calm group of Olympic lifters who were doing, I'm doing 3 sets at 95% of my snatch today. It's just a different animal, dude.
Yeah, it is. It is. It's a whole different mentality. I do think that, like the small fish in a big pond, for me, never did drugs, fair enough. I think I'm a fairly large person, according to the average.
For sure.
Very dedicated to the powerlifting journey back then, right? The Iron Road, why we named this podcast this. But I feel like I would never have got as strong if I was not training around those people. The intensity, and also when you're the strongest guy in the room, you're not going to be as strong as you'll ever be, unless you're the strongest guy in the world. So having people better than you in any discipline, sports, grappling, anything you try, you want to be practicing with people who are way better than you, way stronger, way faster, because it lights a fire in you that you can only replicate when you are the worst in the room, right? So you want to always have that competitive drive. Then again, if I'm the best, you get kind of complacent, right? You get a little high and mighty. Yeah, I don't got to try so hard today. I'm still way stronger than all these guys. So for me, I was pretty much always one of the weakest ones, but maybe being one of the lighter ones in the group too,
For sure.
At my heaviest at strongman.
Yeah, but you got to give yourself more credit though. Like you would do powerlifting every now and again, like for fun, but you were a strongman competitor and you were doing things that might not necessarily carry over to it. I mean, you're doing like yoke runs and farmers walks. Like, yes, that does build a big base of strength, but like, are you going to catch up to the guy who's deadlifting twice a week, every week off the floor, when you're doing other stuff? Oh, well, this show's coming up. I got to do an axle deadlift, or I have to do a 16-inch block pull. Like, yes, you will still get stronger, but like we were always practicing those lifts. And so we were always closer to our like highest level at any given time because technically we were dialed in. And that was like all we did. That was all we did. Where you was like, yeah, I'll do a meet. I want to get my deadlift up. And so I'll do a meet. Right.
Sure.
And so, it was just a different animal for you. So I think you got to give yourself like a little bit more credit there. The rest of us, like I was not even remotely interested in doing strongman. Like I just didn't care. Like I just
very different sports.
Yeah.
Right.
And maybe I would have enjoyed it.
Similar mentality, like you said, that Olympic lifting is a different mentality, and I do agree.
Yeah.
Whereas the intensity and the ferocity that strongman and powerlifting bring, but you said like powerlifting is 3 movements, all on the barbell. It's very comfortable. It's not comfortable, but it's very familiar.
It's predictable.
Yeah. Whereas in strongman, there's let's say 5 classes of events, and then in those classes, there's probably at least 5 different implements you can find in each class. So you have to be good at, let's say, 25 to 30 to 50 things. So, you can be good at carrying things, but you're not good at carrying kegs. So if you have the sandbag in your event, then you're really good. But then if they throw a keg in last minute, and again, with strongman and amateur contest strongman, anything can change at any moment, right? You don't realize, like, you're not going to a contest where all the weights are weighed and measured and the plates, the barbell is the same as you always use. It's conventional. Everything's rusty. This barbell is way thicker than my barbell at home.
Hmm.
It's got more whip to it. Everything in strongman, especially amateur strongman shit show, has a different feel, and you have to be ready for anything almost. So it was harder to track your strength in a certain way because powerlifting really does give you very familiar, predictable, repeatable results in a certain degree.
Yeah, and I think that's part of what I liked about it. Like, even when I got into phases where I was like trying to look better or whatever, like I still had the powerlifting mentality of like, okay, I'm pretty sure these are the lifts that make these muscles grow. You know what I mean? Like weighted chin ups and say like rack pulls. I really really liked for building my back. So I was chasing PRs every time I came in there. You know, I had a PR for 5 and I had a PR for 8 to 12 for a down set. Like I didn't squat anymore. I Smith machine squatted and I did hack squats, but I still counted the plates and I had everything down and I wanted to get stronger. And I even for me to really generate a good result from hypertrophy, I had to approach it the same way. Like I'm coming in, like I'm getting mad if I have to use a different hack squat machine because it's
Yeah,
different. I
yeah,
like I want to use the same machine because I decided I my goal is 6 plates aside, right? And so I still took that mentality with me in training for aesthetics to a certain extent because that's what gets me motivated. So it's just a very easy way to track progress. And you know, for our listeners out there, I think it's kind of like a lesson. Like at the end of the day, if you're getting stronger in the 5 to 8 rep range and you're not getting bigger, it usually just means you have to eat more because
usually,
we've
usually,
ironed out
yeah,
you are going to get stronger. The muscle growth will come, assuming that you're feeding yourself, right? And yes, there are limitations to that training style. Like if you are like a freakishly strong bodybuilder, the risk of injury, if you're incline benching 455 for sets of 12, that's when guys start to do more pump stuff because it's like, okay, if I put 20 more pounds on this, I could tear my pec, which will end my career. Whereas if I just go for more volume, maybe I won't blow my body in half. A different thing. But our audience is not are not professional bodybuilders, they're
no,
average guys. And so for almost everyone, I would say, yeah, some sort of progressive overload is really, really important because it removes the guesswork. Like I wasn't even thinking about like getting, I mean, I wanted to get big, but like I never approached my powerlifting training like, oh, this is for back thickness or width, or I got to get my glutes or hamstrings. I was just like, the glute ham raise makes my deadlift go up. And I'm going to do these things obsessively. And before I knew it, I had 29-inch legs.
yeah,
You know what I mean?
yeah,
Just from
it's true.
doing those movements. So like, I think there's an element to that. Like you want to be able to track your progress. And it's unfortunate in strongman that it's all over the place. But I remember
Yeah,
you specifically, uh, I'm not going to say the guy's name, but he was a great coach. You hired this guy, Mike something or another, a phenomenal lighter weight powerlifter. He had you squatting 3 days a week.
yeah,
I remember this. And you were front squatting some crazy weights, working up to like sets of 3 or 5 or whatever it would be, 3 days a
yeah,
week.
very
Granted, it
heavy.
gave you tendonitis that took 6 years to go away, but it made you strong as shit.
There are a number of factors that went into that, but yeah, the training style. I think he's trained. You know, he trained a lot of strong men who were on drugs and who maybe had more resiliency than I had. And yeah, between the front squatting and log and axle push pressing, it was like that. You had to like drop into a half squat and then force your way out of it. So all that tendon pressure also didn't warm up. I was working so much in the personal training space that I would sleep 5 hours maybe a night, eating like garbage, you know, eating enough to keep my body weight up, but not eating healthy things that would help me recover down to the cellular level. So, you know, I'm definitely when you were young and you think you're invincible, you do a lot of dumb things. So I think half of that is my responsibility, and then half of it maybe is the coach over planning. Let's put it that way.
To his credit, a
I
lot of
got very
guys like
small.
us don't tell the coaches that they feel like shit. You just keep doing it, right? So it's like,
Yeah,
oh yeah, I'm getting fucking blown apart from this training, but like I'm also getting stronger, and that actually at that time means more to you than your health. So you're like, whatever, like who cares? Like
it meant
this is the
everything.
price I'm willing to pay. And
Yeah.
unfortunately, that could lead to you taking like a pretty serious hiatus or maybe being like mentally burned out or something because you start to feel like shit so much outside of the gym that catches up to you.
It was
dude,
pretty
yeah,
agonizing. I used
yeah,
to drop 6 Advil before a squat session just so I can, feel nothing and get through it. Because if I felt my tendons, I would be hesitant, and you can't be hesitant around, with under hundreds of pounds.
no,
So you have to
you're gonna kill
be,
yourself.
yeah. So, but I remember that when I realized I had to stop, I was driving somewhere and I was in a backseat of a smallish car with my family, and my knees were bent for maybe 15 minutes. They were bent
Uh-huh,
like a normal person.
uh-huh.
I was in such throbbing agony from my tendonitis that I was like, something's got to give because this is not getting any better. And I keep masking the symptoms with, again, Advil, anti-inflammatories before I go train. But all the time when I wasn't training, let's say I can mask the pain and then squat crazy weight. When I'm getting out of a chair, I feel like I'm 90. I felt terrible. I just neglected, my coach used to say I had grandma knees. So I took that for what it was. But I think I also told him a little bit about what I was feeling, but then I also masked it and just didn't want to stop because I was so obsessed with the strength journey, the pursuit.
Dude, I remember one of the years that we spotted and loaded at the West Side Pro Invitational. At the time, I was driving a Nissan Sentra, and I drove my crew guys to York Barbell, spotted and loaded, and then drove back in the same day. And it was summer, it was hot as hell. I remember I'm driving, and I have the air conditioning blasting, and it's like on my legs, you know what I mean? And when I got to get out of my car, it took me 10 minutes to like straighten my legs out and get back into my house. And every now and again, I'll feel beat up from jujitsu, and I'm like, man, am I getting old? And I'm like, I felt worse when I was 27. Like way worse,
Easily.
way, way, way
But yeah,
worse. So like, it's funny because I just, it goes to show you what training like a nut job can do to you. And I think that what causes guys to burn out is when the rest of their life caves in. Like for me, the reason why I got out of the sport, and I'm a little embarrassed to admit this, but not so much. There's two reasons. First of all, at the time, I opened a gym with a friend of ours, and I was away from my training crew, and suddenly training was boring. I was training by myself, and I missed the hooliganism and the shit talking, and I just wasn't enjoying it the way that I was enjoying it when you have a crew of guys. There's no real rest. You're spotting, you're loading, you're coaching. When you're by yourself, you just look at your stopwatch and wait 5 minutes, and
yeah,
that sucks. Like that's not fun. And so like I, I started to hate it, but also I was being, I think, really irresponsible with PED use. And I was starting to notice like the toll that it was taking on me, like psychologically. And I think that that's a lot of guys are afraid to talk about that. They think it means you're a pussy, or maybe they've done drugs for so long that they don't know who they are without the drugs. So for them, that's like their new normal. But I remember, we used to take tren before every competition, and we eventually had a rule. We were not allowed to make a major life decision while we were on tren. You couldn't
wow,
quit a job, start a job, break up with a girlfriend, or start dating someone until the drug was out of your system. And you were, this is literally something that like me and a couple of my close friends were kind of held each other to. And I was training for my last meet, and I had just started dating the woman who was my now wife. Now I've known her since like 1997, right? So like those things about someone you're dating that would instill doubt in you. Oh, is this who this person is? That wasn't there for me because I knew her for so long.
fair enough.
Started taking tren for my last competition, and I found myself getting crazy paranoid. Who's she with? What's going on? What's she doing? What's it like? Willingly paranoid. And I'm like, I am going to detonate our relationship with the woman who I know is wife material, who I now have 2 children with, because I can't think clearly because of these drugs. And I was like, I just can't keep doing this to myself. Like just thinking that she was cheating on me. What does she mean by that? And I'm not that kind of person.
Sure.
I'm really not. It was making me so crazy. And a couple guys that I had known had kind of referenced that they were experiencing the same thing. And so I decided to take a hiatus, come off drugs for a while. And that's when a friend of ours got me into training Sambo. And I just kind of never looked back. I just didn't get back into powerlifting. But for me, it was the psychological and social effects of what the drugs were doing to me mentally. They were making every other area of my life so miserable that, oh, well, we've got a meet coming up. Well, guess what? If you want to hit your PRs, you got to do trend, which in retrospect is stupid. There are other drugs you could have taken. They're smart, but
Of
that's how
course.
we thought at the time. And then it's like, it felt like you were barely holding on to your life for 6 weeks, So
I
at the
can't
time,
imagine that.
I had just opened a new business that, was it less than 6 months old. I'm in this new relationship with the woman who's now the mother of my children. And I'm like, man, I don't know if I could do this and not fuck up. Like how long? And my wife
You have to
doesn't take
start to
steroids. My
weigh
wife
your
doesn't
options at that
know.
point.
Like
Yeah.
if I didn't know better, I'd be like, yeah, that person is blaming their character faults on drugs. But until you've been around it, like you don't understand that it does it can change you. It's like when you're on trend, the only good part of your day is when you're lifting. Every other part of your day is terrible.
Do you think it's because it gives you such intensity that you need to pour that out on something purposeful? Like you can actually use all the energy and aggression you have from the drug in that environment where when you're working and you're doing whatever you're doing day to day, going to grocery shopping, you can't, throw your
You're out of your
grocery
mind.
cart over the
You're out of your
supermarket.
mind.
So yeah. So
What it
nothing's an
is, dude,
outlet.
think
Nothing's
of
an
like
outlet for that.
part of the reason why steroids work, in particular trend, is it is a central nervous system stimulant,
Yeah.
right? So if your nervous system is stimulated, you'll lift more weights. If you lift more weight, you'll get more tissue growth. Now, tren is not anabolic. It's very androgenic. So you're not going to gain a lot of muscle taking tren. You'll lose fat and you'll get stronger for your body weight, which is why tren is so popular for like weight class strength athletes. It's become a lot less popular now that people realize that it's kind of insane and maybe not everyone should be doing it. But like, so it jacks you up so much that sleep becomes a problem. Like you can't sleep. Okay. But yeah, you're out of your mind. The analogy I always use, you're a man, you're a real man. So you'll understand this. Like, you get in your car when you're in your early 20s, you're going somewhere, turn on the radio, and being on trend is like this. You get in the car, turn on the radio, and fucking Dragula comes on, right? And you just turn that shit up and you start driving, right? And you're just having it, the windows are down, you're just having the time of your life. And then another song comes on. You're like, fuck yeah, let's go, Slayer. And then Pantera comes on. But after about 4 or 5 songs, you're ready to roll the windows up and listen to a podcast. When you're on trend, you can't. The windows are always down. The music is always up. Okay.
That's a good
And
analogy. It's a good
and
analogy.
even if you want to turn it off, you can't turn it off. And it starts to really wear on you, And I think it's always a chicken or the egg question. Like some guys that are defenders of trend will say, well, it's not the drug so much as it's the sleep deprivation that comes from the drug. It's like, well, listen, you'd be sleeping if you weren't taking trend. So let's maybe fuck it. Let's just kind of just knock that off here. We don't have to defend this. It's not like your mother that I'm insulting here, although for some people, I suppose it is. But like you're so jacked up, you can't sleep, which makes you like insanely crotchety. Okay. It jacks your libido absolutely through the roof. It makes it like impossible to focus. It's, not to be gross, it's like unquenchable. So it's like you're trying to scratch an itch that's impossible to scratch. And you just feel like you're getting pulled in a million different directions. And all for what? To deadlift maybe 20 more pounds than you would have deadlifted without it. And that's even questionable. Like trend is really no longer in vogue for lifters, as far as I understand. And we're hitting the highest totals ever. People are doing incredible things in the sport. So I don't even think it was really necessary. But that was how we thought at the time. And much like your knees, for me, it was like my mental health. And I also did start to realize, like, because I had such a visceral disdain for the whole world, I was always trying to be scary. So I used to leave a neck harness with like 75 pounds loaded on next to and I had to do 100 reps a night, right? So I had like a 20-inch neck, literally like a 20-inch neck, maybe more. And I definitely gave myself sleep apnea.
Yeah, I'm
Like
sure.
so obviously my sleep is shit quality. Plus I'm on drugs. So I remember at 28 being so tired all day and being like, man, am I getting old? What do you mean? You're not getting old. You're out of your neck is huge. You probably need a CPAP, and you're absolutely outside of your mind on anabolics, and it adds up. Now, the only thing I'll say is, at least as a power lifter, if you're on trend, it's maybe less bad. Oh, it's definitely less bad than a bodybuilder because it's a pre-contest drug for bodybuilding, and they're also doing massive caloric deprivation simultaneously,
Got it.
right? Like I was never trying to get shredded to make the weight, right? Like I was always within striking distance of the weight class, never really had a bad cut ever. Some of my best totals would have been national level if I was just, in retrospect, if I just cut to 220. There are plenty of competitions where I was walking around at 237. If I had just cut the weight, I would have qualified for national level meets, and maybe it's a whole different story. So I never had that effect where it was like I'm starving and I'm not sleeping. That wasn't there. It was just the drugs were making me crazy, but it felt like I just couldn't handle it anymore. And look, like if you're the kind of guy that can handle it, good for you. I couldn't. And to me, the risk wasn't worth the reward. It's not like I was getting paid $1 million a year to do this. You're paying money to do it. You're giving away a huge amount of your time and your health. Just wasn't for me anymore. And then
Yeah.
I just felt so much better when all that shit got out of my system. My sleep improved, like everything improved. That to me it was a no-brainer. Like, yeah, I just think I have to get away from this. If I still had a crew of guys, I probably would have kept doing it. I might have cut the trend out because of the situation with my wife and everything. I think it would have been worth it. Would have totally been worth it. But it just stopped being fun, and that's that.
So for the up and coming powerlifters out there, what would you would not recommend trend? It would not be one of your, because it's very, I would say, no pun intended here, trendy. The trend twins, and when every other clip or podcast you hear, trend has dropped a lot. And I don't think people understand the negative consequences that comes along with that type of drug. And it's not the same as just taking a, high level testosterone, even though, most people wouldn't recommend high level testosterone synthetically injected, at any point in time, but unless you need it for replacement therapy. But do you recommend people go on or try these things, or is
If
it
you need
not
trend to
worth
be, if you
the
need
risk?
trend to be a great power lifter, you'll never be a great power lifter. It's that
Fair
simple.
enough.
You do need to use anabolics if you want to be a world class lifter. There's no doubt about it. But let's think of it this way, dude. Like, you've trained naturally your whole life. Okay, the margin of error that you as a natural lifter have before you no longer make progress is really small. If you are off by your diet and training and rest by 20%, you get minimal gains. Okay. If you're blasting drugs, you could be off by 60% and still get
So it
gains.
makes up for
Okay.
it.
Yeah.
So it fills
But
a gap almost.
it also means that you don't really learn the things that you need to learn. I think if I had my approach with diet now is so much more precise, so much healthier. Back then, I was kind of doing what you were doing. I was just eating a lot. I got to get bigger, got to get bigger, got to get bigger. And I didn't, because the margin of error was so big, I don't think I really felt the consequences of not having all that stuff kind of dialed in. I think if you want to get into powerlifting now, the first thing I would say is do it for yourself. I think another reason why I started to hate it was I was so happy the first time I deadlifted 500 and when I deadlifted 600 because it was like, oh, this is something I never thought that I could do. Once I started comparing myself to guys who were on the national level, it started to take the joy out of it for me because it was like, I'm nothing compared to these guys. And sure, that's a mentality issue on my part, but I felt like I started doing it for different reasons and it took the fun out of it. So like as Donnie Thompson always used to say, Eric, nobody cares about your squat. He's right. Like no one cares about your lifts but you. And if you approach it that way, you'll probably have more success,
Yeah.
to be totally honest.
Yeah.
But I would say you have to learn how to get results before you take drugs. That means how to train properly, how to eat properly. And yeah, if you want to take drugs later, sure, understand that there's no free lunch. You will get side effects. It's just a matter of how severe and which ones. Like you will get them. It's not even a question. And most people who go on drugs, look, they never come off because the emotional and physical agony of coming off is just something you put off for so long that eventually you can't fix it. I always told myself I'd come off, but it'll probably take me a year to recover. No, I got a lot going on right now. I won't do that. I won't do that. Well, before you know it, you're on TRT for the rest of your life. Now, if that's a deal you want to make, fine. But do you want to have to inject yourself every day, maybe for the rest of your life, starting at age 25? Probably not. that's maybe at 40, 45, 50, whatever the case may be. But steroids are absolutely addictive. Your sense of identity gets tied into I'm jacked, I'm strong, I look good. And you realize that you frankly probably do need these things to maintain that sense of self, unless you do some soul searching and realize I'm actually more than what I lift or how many abs I have. But a lot of people don't get over that. And dude, you just can't tell though, a 22-year-old that is like, if you were coming up now, Ian, you probably would have taken drugs because of social media. It's so
Maybe,
prevalent. The
maybe.
amount of people that are, shirtless and everything.
Sure.
Instagram was only starting to become a thing when we were in the sport.
I know.
So we were comparing ourselves to guys we saw on YouTube, but they're in a singlet or they're squatting in a fucking hoodie. And the emphasis was just the weight. Like, I remember we'd come in, oh, did you see what Zahir squatted last week? Oh, he's going to break Dan Green's record. Like,
Sure.
it was never
Never
like
how they look.
yeah.
Never
It
how
was
they look.
never about like an airbrushed photo of it. It was like, yo, dude, like Lillibridge just squatted 850 in the gym. He must have had 25 pounds in the tank. He's taken the 275 world record. That's how we thought. And so I don't think we were necessarily as insecure about our appearance and didn't feel. I think now it's really hard because everyone feels the pressure to do that. And here you are potentially slaving away, and some idiot just starts blasting testosterone and passes you in 3 years. That's probably is a really shitty feeling, to be honest with you. But as we said before, maybe adopt a little bit of that Eastern European model and ask where he's going to be in 10 years and where you're going to be in 10 years. Because when you start pushing 40, that's something you really start thinking about.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a lot of wisdom, because you really, when you are in your mid-20s, you don't consider the health factor. You don't consider the risks. You have a priority it really means nothing in the real world. How much you squat, deadlift, and bench press, how strong you are, how big you look and scare you, means nothing. So obviously you want to have enough strength to defend yourself and skills to, if something like, God forbid, someone breaks into your home, that's actually transferable, use of this muscle and drive. But for the most part, none of that matters. So people who just hop on drugs because it is so trendy nowadays and it's so socially acceptable, I think a lot more socially acceptable now than it used to be. Like you said, because when you're looking at somebody on Instagram, you're looking at the top 0.01% of physiques most of the time. These people are outrageous. Besides drugs, they have genetics to boot. So you don't want to compare yourself to these people. Keep beating yourself. That's one of the montages that I always love. The mantras that I always love was just keep being better than yourself from last week, from yesterday. How can you get better? How can you edge yourself out? Because I can take all the drugs in the world, my abs will not look like this guy's abs because they're just not formed that way, right? It's not, like my eyes aren't going to turn blue. So it's like those things you don't have from the get-go, drugs aren't going to solve your problems.
I think, another thing you have to think about too is we don't actually know the consequences of this behavior yet, right? So like it's entirely possible that this generation of people on steroids, blasting gear, extreme diets, it's possible that nothing bad will happen to them. It's possible that they'll live long, healthy lives, right? But we do see, say, the consequences of a lot of 90s bodybuilders. How many of those guys died? A lot. And those are the guys you know about. Not the guy that's like trying to get his pro card for 20 years and just has a heart attack in his bed, and leaves behind a wife and kid or something like that, right? So like there's dozens of 90s pro bodybuilders that dropped dead, and those are the ones that were worth frankly writing about because of not because of who they were as a person, because of their bodybuilding accomplishments. The community knows about these people, right? So we do see that being too big and blasting too much drugs is a problem. And I think it was Dorian Yates that said this. What's kind of scary though is those guys were not shredded all year long. Like most of the pictures you saw in bodybuilding magazines were taken before and after the Olympia or the Arnold Classic. As a bodybuilder, that's what you did. Like you were close to a show, you flew in, you took all your pictures, you went back and you trained. So yeah, it could be April and there's a picture of Dorian Yates on Muscle and Fitness looking shredded. But the reality is the Olympia is in September or whenever it is now. And he doesn't look like that right now.
It's a great point.
He's in a caloric surplus. He's probably taking less drugs. A bodybuilder always takes more drugs around the competition than they do during the bulk, always, because food is the most important drug, obviously. And so these guys nowadays are trying to be shredded all year long, right? So it may be a logical assumption that some of them will drop dead, because the drugs they're taking, be it just not even just steroids, but fat burners, appetite suppressants, whatever the case may be, diuretics, to look shredded, to take pictures every single day. It's way different than, again, if you're Jay Cutler in 2002 and you decide, all right, for me to beat Ronnie, I can only compete once a year to put on the size. So I take all of my pictures in an 8-week period, right? Before and after a show. Otherwise, I'm not depriving myself that much. I'm not running my body into the ground because, like we said, it's not just a matter of I'm taking the drugs. It's also a matter of your sleep quality probably sucks, right? Like your body is being redlined to look that good all year long. And unfortunately, I suspect that we're going to see some people with some pretty major health consequences. We're already seeing them.
It's already happening.
I'll
It's
close this
happening.
out on this. I think this is a good way to take the podcast home. Relatively recently, there was a young girl who died at the Arnold Classic, I think in her hotel room. 20-something-year-old girl. She took diuretics just so that she would look shredded. She wasn't even competing.
Seriously.
Okay. She was just to take pictures with her followers.
Wow.
Had a fucking heart attack
That's
at
crazy.
25 years old. Okay.
Yeah.
So, like, it happens. It will continue to happen. And I think if you're going to get into training, it's one of the best things you can do. But, it's also not worth dying for. You have to learn the healthy way to do it. And you have to find mentors and people, hopefully us, that can teach you the right way to do these things and really minimize the costs you have to pay in life down the road.
Yeah. And on also a positive note to sign off with, I went to see a friend of mine, Omar, compete in his second ever powerlifting meet. And it was in Miami. And it was probably about 40 lifters or so. And I can say that the caliber and quality of person, like the niceness of the people, was way better than it used to be. Like we train with degenerates. They were good enough guys, I guess, but some of them were kind of scumbags. If you hear some West Side barbell stories, they were really bad people. The powerlifting, it's become more mainstream now. So I think it's opened up to a wider variety of people, and many people were not, obviously, clearly not on drugs. They were just normal people, competing, and the camaraderie is still there that I remember. It was just a really good feeling environment where it wasn't so toxic and aggressive as it used to be that I remember from when we were doing them on Long Island. But it was just cool to see women in their 60s competing, people of all walks of life kind of competing and not having to be on drugs or having to have that sicko mentality to step under the bar. So it was pretty cool. It was really nice to be back in that environment for a bit. I really miss it. I want to share some stories next time about our war stories and our powerlifting days, because some of the best times of my life, unsustainable, but some of the best times of my life, very funny, great stories. But I definitely want to reminisce a little more next time, because I do miss those days a lot.
All right. Well, that's all I got for today, my friend. So guys, this is the Iron Road signing off.
Thanks for walking with us.